In my despair, I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love has always won. There may be tyrants and strong men who for a time may seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. Think about this. Always. Welcome to the program, Amba, this week. Cameroon soldiers are under immense pressure to defeat the nationalist forces of Ambazonia. Momo, Manu, Bui. These areas are under constant surveillance and attacks by thousands of Cameroon forces. War is coming to Cameroon.
Direction le Cameroun, outil du pays, la partie anglophone de ce pays bilingue en rouge sur cette carte, connaît une insurrection armée lancée par des groupes sécessionnistes, des groupes qui ambitionnent de créer un nouveau pays, l'Ambazonie.
Pays dont les deux régions anglophones sont en crise.
As we all know, when a strong man dies, his children start fighting for power, causing dynastic quarrels at all levels, which in the end leads to a civil war. Let us dive into our history. Remember the story of the great Chamba people, today referred to as Bali. Tales of old describe their descent into the grass fields as ruthless. As they came in their thousands, the ground shook like an earthquake. They brought fear into the hearts of tribes who already occupied the grassfield areas. They colonized and displaced many from their ancestral homelands. But the night fell on the Bali people when their great leader, Gawobe, died in the Battle of Bafufundo in today's west region of Cameroon. The Titan was defeated, and Gangsing, who was not measured as equal as their great leader, took over the mantle. Troubled times had begun, for a people with such sophisticated and massive armies found themselves fighting each other on who should assume leadership. Gawobe's 6 sons and 1 daughter split the nation into 7 different tribes we all call Bali today. From Kumbat to Gangsin, to Gashu, to Gang, to Muti, who retreated to the ancestral homeland, to Kontan, who later joined their sister, Nyonga. Paul Biya is the strong man who will fall not long from now, and the moral of the story is, no matter how much time a man can be seen as invincible, in the end, they always fall. The elite of Yaoundé know Cameroon in a civil war will empower the Ambazonian nationalist fighters, and they will break away from Cameroon with ease. God has willed it. Ambazonians have suffered a lot from the primitive ways of the people across the Mongo in the east. Anglophones regard themselves as second-class citizens in Cameroon, but no, they are not second-class citizens in Cameroon. The Bamilikes are, just because they stood and fought for the independence of La République du Cameroun, which was stolen from them and handed over to the Bulu Beti clique that owned Cameroon as their prize. Anglophones are slaves in Cameroon, good only for the natural and human resources that they possess. Show me a wealthy Ambazonian in Cameroon who is independent from the system that is still alive today. We had been rendered useless, and Cameroon, as stated by Paul Biya, its strongman, was finally in the process of Frenchifying us all.
Avait la possibilité de les intégrer directement dans le système francophone, qui était celui de la majorité du peuple, 80%. Mais je crois que les pays sont soucieux aujourd'hui d'affirmer leur identité.
They never knew the will of the Ambazonian is the most potent weapon that we had. They even asked, Honorable Wiba, qu'est-ce que vous allez faire? Cameroon in its pride and confusion sent the old man to declare darkness on the people of Ambazonia.
Je pense que les choses sont désormais parfaitement clair pour tout le monde. Le Cameroun est victime des attaques à répétition d'une bande de terroristes se réclamant d'un mouvement sécessionniste. Face à ces actes d'agression, je tiens à rassurer le peuple camerounais que toutes les dispositions sont prises pour mettre hors d'état de nuire ces criminels et faire en sorte que la paix et la sécurité soient sauvegardées sur toute l'étendue du territoire national. Je vous remercie.
Tanks started rolling in. The ground was shaking. Thousands of Cameroon's best elite soldiers descended into Amba land. Our people were slaughtered like game. Innocent folk arrested and sent to jail in their thousands. Hundreds thrown from helicopters. Mass graves everywhere. Some which have not been discovered till today. Rape, massacre, killing of women and children was the actions that they took to curb the rise of Ambazonia. 7 years gone, and the crimes are still being committed on the Ambazonian people till today. A truck owned by Cameroon's forces crushed to death 3 Ambazonians while chasing a taxi who refused to pay bribe because he was tired of giving bribe every to and fro. This caused an uprising as citizens of Bamenda and bike riders stood firm and protested against the killing of these citizens, taking over the town of Bamenda with no fear. Cameroon soldiers with HIV intentionally rape Ambazonian girls and infect them with HIV. Even when the hospitals sound the alarm, nothing is done to stop this. Cameroon soldiers have been given the license to kill anyone who speaks English. For this same reason, the US government under Donald Trump's administration suspended Cameroon from the AGOA initiative, the African Growth Opportunity Act, that helps sub-Saharan African nations improve their economies. Sources say the Biden administration is in close talks with the Yaoundé regime on readmission into the said program. These things are happening even though Cameroon hasn't stopped its barbarism and slaughter of the Ambazonian people. Talk about double standards. Now we all see it's not about human rights and social justice as America preaches around the world. It's about one thing only: America's interests. Cameroon plays the East-West card, trying to gain allies at this all-time low they find themselves. And with the rising influence of Russia and China in Africa, the US sheds all its principles so they can regain their foot in the African continent. The USA and Europe needs to let us know if they stand for human rights and social justice or their interests. The double standards are just too visible for one to keep quiet. What is good for the goose is as well good for the gander. You can't support Ukraine and La République du Cameroun at the same time. Huge mineral deposits have been discovered in Donga and Mantum. In the present world of industries, iron ore, as we know it, is a gem, and whoever has access to huge deposits enriches themselves with trillions of dollars. As God blessed Ambazonia with a lot of human and natural resources, Cameroon vows they can't let us go, as we provide 67% of their GDP. They will rather kill every one of us than lose such resources. Calamity is at the gates of Etudi, and the 3 factions fighting for power are ready. Ambazonians in their end find a rise in enablers by the day. No more do we find great men like Chief Kuva Likenye, Dr. EML Endeli, Augustin Gomjoa. Our so-called elites of today have all joined the French court and pay allegiance only to the Grandmaster Paul Biya and friends. We humans create our own paths and future. Now is the time Amazonians have to rethink the choice of nationhood over slavery. We can't lose more than 40,000 of our people and want to go back as slaves. We need to choose if we want to be the house Negro or we want to be the field Negro. Whatever we agree on earth will be agreed in heaven. The Department of Human Rights and Humanitarian Services of the Ambazonia Governing Council, led by Akosong Raymond, addressed a letter to the Biden administration. In this letter, he gave many pertinent points on reasons why he thought the United States government should not admit Cameroon into AGOA again. In an interview I had with him, he has the following to say about this process going on. Mr. Akosong, welcome to the program, sir.
Good morning, Samuel. Thanks for having me.
Why was Cameroon suspended from the AGOA initiative?
First of all, this is, I must admit, a very important topic that I am interested in discussing. So once again, thanks for having me. Before I delve into, attempting an answer to your question, it would be fair to provide some context to your listeners. AGOA is African Growth and Opportunity Act. It is a law that was enacted in 2000 to promote economic development in sub-Saharan Africa through increased trade and investment. AGOA was meant to provide duty-free access to the U.S. market for thousands of products from eligible sub-Saharan African countries. So the aim was to encourage African countries to open their economies, improve their business environments, and attract investment in return by providing access to large and lucrative U.S. market. The law was intended to help diversify African economies and create new opportunities for job creation and economic growth. Having said that, as you know, quid pro quo is a fundamental, foundational practice in international politics. AGOA is not for every African country. There are some minimum requirements, and I can immediately think of about 7 of them. But for the purpose of this discussion, I am certain you read our public statement urging the Americans not to readmit Cameroon into AGOA. So again, for the purpose of this chat, I will limit the AGOA membership requirements to be relevant to the Ambazonia War of Liberation. One of the reasons why Cameroon was kicked out of the group in the first place. So to be a member of AGOA, you must be, first of all, a sub-Saharan African country. The country in question must be working to promote economic growth and political reforms, including the rule of law, internationally recognized human rights. So to your question, Cameroon was removed from AGOA eligibility in 2019 by the Trump administration due to concerns over human rights violations in Ambazonia. Specifically, the decision was based on findings that the Cameroonian government had engaged in gross violations of internationally recognized and protected human rights of the Amazonian people. So the U.S. government had previously, before that removal from AGOA, they had previously expressed concerns that the deteriorating human rights situation in Amazonia was so high, and that included extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detention and torture, scorched earth policy, where homes and sources of livelihood of persons were burned. Despite these concerns, Cameroon did not take sufficient measures to address the human rights abuses leading to its removal from AGOA eligibility. I think that Cameroon also violated the requirement of not engaging in activities that undermines U.S. national security or foreign policy interest. And we also saw that missionary Wesco was killed by Cameroon occupation forces in Ambazonia in sometime, around 20, if my memory doesn't fail me, around 2018, 2019.
From your letter, I see your firm stance against the U.S.-Cameroon talks on re-entry into AGOA. Is the U.S. playing a double standard or justice?
That's a tough one, Sam. Well, time will tell if the U.S. government is playing a double standard. I tell you what, Cameroon's economy is bleeding, and everybody knows that. The economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic, the subsequent global shocks that was provoked by the war in Ukraine, and most significantly, underline that, the cost of occupying Ambazonia that the ADF forces have put to bear on Cameroon, all of these have hit Cameroon so hard, denting its economic growth and aggravating Cameroon's sovereign debt positions. It is important to state that Cameroon's economic growth slumped to 0.5% in 2020, and it has been in a state of coma for all these years. So it is not surprising that Cameroon is currently on its knees in Washington begging for readmission into AGOA. When the AGOFC leadership got wind of this, that Cameroon is currently in Washington begging for readmission, we decided to engage the US government and the international system publicly. So we are making a very strong case for why Cameroon continues to fall short from meeting the minimum statutory requirements for AGOA membership. In fact, since 2020, Cameroon has escalated its human rights abuses in Ambazonia. La République du Cameroon has demonstrated a complete disregard for the international system by feet-dragging its participation in the Canada-led negotiation process that seeks to resolve the ongoing war in Ambazonia. So Cameroon should understand that, resolving Ambazonia would assist them, towards being readmitted into AGOA. What have we found recently? Cameroon's record in Ambazonia has not improved. Instead, Cameroon has intensified its violent campaign against the Ambazonian people. Like I mentioned before, systematic burning of villages, the abduction and torture of civilians, and I even forgot this, the use of rape and sexual violence as weapons of war. With all of these glaringly flagrant violation of the very minimum AGOA membership standards, it will be very surprising to have Cameroon qualify for readmission into AGOA, given that its human rights records again have worsened over the years. We are very confident that the United States, as a leading voice of, for human rights and democracy, must continue to send a strong message to Cameroon that it will not compromise its democratic values nor tolerate violations of its sacred principles, and that impunity for human rights abuses in Ambazonia by Cameroon will not be tolerated.
What course will be taken if the United States readmits Cameroon into AGOA?
That's another interesting question, Sam. It is a difficult one. I would be telling a lie if I said the AGOFC had the wherewithal to arm twist the United States government to do the bidding of the Ambazonian people. But all we can say is that readmitting Cameroon into AGOA would be the same as moving 10 steps forward and 100 steps backward. Again, if only for emphasis, our statement strongly urged the Biden administration to support efforts to hold Cameroon accountable for its human rights abuses, including through targeted sanctions and other measures that signal to the Biya government that its actions in Ambazonia have consequences. And it wasn't only a call we made, to the Biden administration. We also implored, if you read the statement, we implored equally the international community, including human rights groups, the government of Canada, the United Kingdom, the European Union, and the African Union to join their voices to our call to the Biden administration to maintain Cameroon's suspension from AGOA and to continue to take bold and decisive action to hold the government of Cameroon accountable for its gross violations of human rights, which have only worsened over the years. The Ambazonia Governing Council always stand ready to work with the United States government and other partners to achieve a peaceful and just resolution to the ongoing conflict in Ambazonia, one that upholds the principles of human rights, democracy, and self-determination. Ambazonians are a people with the right to self-determination.
Amba, oh yeah, oh yeah. Amba, oh yeah, oh yeah. The great question of the day will not be decided by speeches and resolutions, but by blood and iron. Block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, the Ambazonian people and their brave fighters have decided that Cameroon must go. As the war rages on, we will keep you updated on this program. Amba, this week.
Another Savior, holy, 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 holy. Ambazonia has another Savior, holy, 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 holy. Ambazonia has another Savior.